Thank you, Bob, for that. And thank you, Frank. God and country, faith and freedom, that's what we have. That's what we're celebrating. That's why we're here. So say again, who's never been to an AFA event? All right, fabulous. Who's here because they saw me or heard of this on War Room? Fabulous. He is a force, is he not? Thank you all for being here. And if this is your first time, I hope it's not your last. I hope you come frequently. The American Freedom Alliance, our general mission is to identify, fight against, inform about threats to this great country, the greatest nation on earth. Right? But tonight is different. Tonight, we're recognizing the goodness and greatness of this country. What we are fighting for, in fact. So obviously our mission is to defend against threats, but this is why this nation is worthy of being defended. There's a quote that goes around, the devil's cleverest wile is to make men believe that he does not exist. We've heard this. I would say that the left's greatest wile, and others too, but the left's greatest wile is to make us believe that this country is not great. But here we know that it is. Here we fight back against that very clever, devious undermining of who we are, and we are going to be strengthened and have more conviction and more confidence in the goodness and greatness of this country. And not only of the founding and the principles, which are key, but we're going to express gratitude to those who have taken us from 1776 through these last 250 years to now. If you've seen the signs around, we have collections of quotes. Have you seen them? Many are from 250 years ago and even further back than that, because let's not forget this very important point. 1776 was 150 years after this continent had begun to be settled. That's a really long time for a bifurcation culturally to have, and politically and from a faith position had been taking root. So by the time 1776 happened, we had our own ethos, our own everything. So I have quotes from earlier, many are from Eric Metaxas's books, right up through Reagan and including, of course, the moon landing and from Operation Overlord. So before we continue, I would very much like to honor the military veterans who are here with us today. I'm going to name them. Please stand. I was wondering if you want to come up, that would be great. You can line up here or just stand and we'll applaud. Your choice. We have Brigadier General Dan Pemberton, U.S. Air Force. Thank you, sir. Combat in Vietnam. Thank you. Colonel Jerry Knotts, U.S. Air Force retired fighter pilot, also Vietnam. Staff Sergeant Bill Hutton, U.S. Marine Corps, combat veteran, also. Captain Bill Ratner, U.S. Navy of Vietnam and Middle East. Colonel Joe Mueller, U.S. Marine Corps. It says retired, but we know you don't retire from the Marine Corps. Dr. Michael Koslow, California State Command Chief, Master Sergeant, U.S. Air Force, retired. Colonel Jerry Knotts, U.S. Air Force. Do we have him? Oh, we've got you twice. There we go. Lee Auger, U.S. Navy. 99 years old, but hang on to your hats. Sassy Reuven, Israeli Special Forces commander from in the raid on Entebbe. Colonel Erin Fritzler, U.S. Army. Did she make it? Or is she? Okay. Pastor Doc Gary Dickey, U.S. Air Force. Piper. Yes? John Warden, who was honored by Secretary of State Hegseth with the American Exceptionalism Award, U.S. Marine Corps. John Warden, conveniently standing. And he is here with Bill Dillon, a World War II veteran. He was in the U.S. Navy submarine service, a World War II submarine vet. Can you believe this? 101 years old. And then we also have Bazooka Joe. Army veteran, received the Silver Star during the Battle of the Bulge for taking out 2 German tanks. Four. My bad, off by half. 107 years old. That's okay. When we talk about these things, when we talk about heroes, when we talk about those who sacrificed everything, not only in 1776, not only in 1620, not only all the era subsequently, the 250 since then, that is who we are, though. We have been self-selecting from that time, and that's what makes this nation the exceptional nation that it is. People who are here up until recently, we need to caveat this a little bit, came here for the opportunity, for the freedom, all the freedoms that are endowed by our Creator, protected by our Constitution, and protected by these great men who sacrificed everything, their lives, their fortunes, sacred honor, like the signatories of the Declaration, who knew they were committing treason, right? None of them did this because they had nothing to lose, but because they had everything to lose. I'm sounding so somber, but I'm really feeling it's a supremely joyous thing that this is our birthright, that the men who wrote the Declaration, 1776, who gave birth to this, the greatest nation in the history of the world, they did this not just for their own selves, but understanding the key elements of what makes a great country. They went back to first principles. And we are the beneficiaries of all of that. So just, I don't have a glass, but let's raise a glass to these great men and those great men and women who gave birth to this nation, brought it through these 250 years and to 250 more. Are there veterans I didn't name? I'm Ed Reynolds. Sorry, Ed. And are there others? Ed, sorry, different list. All right. So, and anybody else, you all, please know that yeah. Thank you. to all our veterans and all those who support them again. Thank you. We really are, yes, thank you. We're really extraordinarily lucky. I know, right? We talk about the greatness of this country, and all those things that make us great are, of course, why they need to take us down, which again is why we do these things. But recognize that our faith, our freedoms, all the building blocks that make us great, all our institutions, these are the load-bearing walls of this country. So part of why we wanted to make sure we do this is to fortify those load-bearing walls and not let them be taken down. So in order to honor that and to build up our joy and our inspiration as we go forward, we chose 4 people who are part of the American Freedom Alliance community. You know them: Frank, Brad Thayer, Suzanne Rayto, and Trevor Loudon. Normally, they speak about the threats that we face all the time, daily, that we're up against. I mean, you've been to our World War III conferences. The threats are real, but today they're each going to say a few words about why they fight. So to start, I'd like to bring up Dr. Bradley Thayer. He's a fellow of the American Freedom Alliance. He has written books on China, and he has a new book coming up about communism that you will be hearing much more about. He's spoken at a number of our conferences, an absolutely brilliant mind. Please welcome Dr. Bradley Thayer.
Karen, thank you very much. Great honor to be here to celebrate America's 250th and to celebrate a book that reflects it in a way like no other, and that's Eric's incredible revolution. And of course, we'll hear much more about that tonight, but it deserves to be noted that he shows us the power, of course, of men and women working together towards that end. As Karen illuminated, they didn't know that they were going to win, certainly, but their faith in Christianity, Eric demonstrates, as no other book really does, how their faith was essentially reflective of God's purpose and of Western civilization. So Karen asked me to talk about the importance of Western civilization, to put Eric's book, of course, in the context of not only, as Eric describes, the greatest revolution and of the greatest country, the United States of America, but also to illuminate what makes Western civilization the greatest civilization. And if we reflect on it, we can see that in its long history, from Athens through Rome, Karen used to teach Latin, so I won't talk about the terrors of translating the Aeneid or other Latin translations, but through considerable turmoil that we recognize as well. The wars of religion, Reformation, of course, Counter-Reformation, the Enlightenment, and the Counter-Enlightenment all occurred within the confines of Western civilization. Great wars, from Homer's account, of course, of Troy to the struggles of today, are reflected in our civilization and have made us who we are. So we celebrate tonight. Everything that we celebrate is a product of Western civilization, and that should be stated directly. It's the greatest civilization. We could list empirically the great names. Homer, of course, beginning through the Greeks, going through the Romans. We could list, of course, Shakespeare and Milton, the giants of philosophy, the giants of art, of music, of literature, of architecture, of medicine, of science, of course, and of political life. And the definitive political ideas and principles that they generated over time have given us that shared history of triumphs and struggles, common philosophies, common ways of reasoning, standards for justifying arguments, law, and the importance of law, and what it means to have a good society, and also what it means to have meaning in life and a good life. We in the West must have civilizational confidence. The West is attacked from within and from without. from without by communists in the Chinese Communist Party, by other actors, Islamist supremacists, and others, but from within as well, from communists and their allies operating within the United States. Our confidence allows us to see that our civilization is unique, and it provides a better grounding for our political principles, for religion, for our philosophy, our aesthetics, than do other civilizations. We must understand it, and we must celebrate it. And just as there are no atheists in foxholes, there are no denigrators of Western civilization and its products, for example, Western medicine, if you have illness, if you have cancer, right? Then, of course, Saddam Hussein would know where to go, of course, if he is ill. King of Jordan knows to go to the Mayo Clinic or to go to MD Anderson, not to be treated in Jordan. So the proof of the pudding is in the eating, and that's true in a civilizational sense, as well as in so many others. We have to recognize that the source, and that is the unique source of the ideas of individual liberty, of democracy, of the rule of law, of human rights, of cultural freedom. These are European ideas. They're not Asian ideas, they're not African, nor are they Middle Eastern ideas, except by adoption. They make Western civilization unique, and Western civilization is valuable to its members and the world, not because it's universal, but because it is unique and precious. It's one of the few bulwarks against tyranny that we have today, and again, it remains under assault from communists and from Islamic supremacists. In fact, there's an inverse relationship between American identity, which is illuminated so well in Eric's book, and the power of communism. The stronger American identity, the weaker communism. The stronger communism, the weaker American identity. Likewise, the greater confidence that we have in our civilization as Westerners, the weaker communism's grip on us, or Islamic supremacist ability to destroy it. Our civilizational confidence is absolutely reflective and illuminated by those values. We can reflect on some recent events, I think, that really bring this point home. Some of you may remember the fire at Notre Dame de Paris, right? A mystery. Nobody knows who started that fire. In fact, it's quite curious that there are a lot of churches that burn in Canada, in Europe, in the UK, in Ireland, and in the United States, but nobody seems to know who starts them. It's one of the world's great mysteries. The rebirth of Notre Dame, right? We celebrated that, of course, in December 2024, and that was a breath of fresh air, Western civilization, that we're far from defeated. We can still make great things and recoup them and rebuild them. The death of Queen Elizabeth II, right, widely acknowledged around the world, in Hong Kong, of course, throughout the Commonwealth, but also in the United States, because it was Queen Elizabeth II who stood for something that was larger than the UK, that was larger than, of course, the royal family, but it was the goodness and decency of the West. So as we're challenged, we need to recognize, in fact, we have nothing for which to apologize. We are the best, and we should say it proudly. It is the West that made the modern world. It sustains the modern world, and it defends the modern world from those who would destroy it from within or from without. So while we celebrate Eric's book, of course, it's exceptional in every respect, we also recognize that that's folded in to the greatness of Western civilization that has to be appreciated, and our confidence should remain unshaken in what we've inherited, of course, from our ancestors, and that we seek to provide to our progeny. Thank you very much.
Context is everything. And we do have so much to be proud of. It is the greatest nation in the history of the world. I just love that title, the audacity of it, because it's true. Yes. And never forget, are we perfect? No. We're just the best. Right? And we aspire in ways that no other nation has ever even considered aspiring. Next, it's a real honor to me to bring up Suzanne Rato. She's been a longtime friend since before I had anything to do with the American Freedom Alliance. And in fact, she was involved long before I was. She and her husband, Robert, were recipients of the 2013 Hand of Freedom Award by the American Freedom Alliance. I wasn't even living here at that time. She is a Holocaust survivor, had come over from Hungary, a refugee. Now she's an American. We love her. She loves America. Suzanne, please come on up.
First of all, thank you, Karen. Thank you for the honor and the privilege of giving me to express my gratitude as a naturalized, grateful American citizen. Distinguished guests, friends, and fellow citizens, we gather today to mark a milestone that seemed like an improbable dream to a small group of farmers, merchants, and scholars who did something entirely unprecedented. They declared that a new nation would be born, one founded on the idea of freedom and that all people are created equal. 250 years later, that incredible experiment is still alive, thriving, and leading the world. Let us remember the inscription on our Liberty Bell that was taken from the Torah: proclaim liberty throughout the land to all the inhabitants thereof. For me, this is a time to celebrate with gratitude. When you grow up in a communist country, you learn very early that the most dangerous thing you can possess is an independent mind. You learn to whisper and are reluctant and fearful to express your thoughts, your beliefs, and your dreams, even to your closest family and friends. I pledge to protect this great country and our freedom from the growing communism. I remember the long lines for basic necessities, the deafening silence in public spaces, and the underlying fear that saying the wrong thing to the wrong person could really alter my family's life forever. The state was everything, and the individual was nothing. We endured through hope and dreams. Living without freedom was no picnic, and take it from one who experienced it. And then I came to America. As many of you who know me know that I came via Australia, and coming to America was the dream of a lifetime. I will never forget my first few weeks here. To many of you who were born here, America is simply home. But to someone who survived Nazism and escaped the tyranny of communism, America is a daily miracle, something to be grateful for. I remember standing in a supermarket aisle, completely overwhelmed by the abundance of choice. But as time went on, I realized the abundance wasn't just about food on the shelves, it was the abundance of freedom. It was the freedom to walk into any place of worship of my choice, or not at all. It was the freedom to criticize the government openly without looking over my shoulder. And I always say to people, I used to have eyes in the back of my head because I always wondered who was looking and listening. It's something that you live with and you can never overlook and never overcome. It was the freedom to work hard, fall, get back up, and build a life entirely of my own making. In the old country, patriotism was demanded of all of us. It was forced on us. We had to parade and call rehearsed slogans. But here, I discovered what true patriotism means, and it begins with gratitude. It's looking at the American flag and seeing a promise that your rights do not come from a dictator or a committee, but are inherent to you as a human being. We live in a time when it's easy to focus on America's imperfections. Every nation has them. But for me, foundation of this exceptional country is a magnificent gift, and the ability to argue, to debate, and to strive for more unity and understanding is a luxury that billions of people around the world can only dream of. As we celebrate our 250th birthday, we honor the generations that came before us, the patriots who secured our independence, the soldiers who defended our freedom, often giving the ultimate sacrifice, the civil rights leaders who expanded liberty, and the countless ordinary citizens whose hard work built this nation. But this celebration is not only about the past, it's also about the future. The responsibility now rests with us to preserve the blessings of liberty, strengthen our communities, and ensure that the promise of America remains vibrant for generations to come. My message to you is simple. Do not take the ordinary for granted. Your ability to speak your mind, to vote, to choose your path are not normal historical standards. They are extraordinary. I love this country, not because it is perfect, but because it allows us to reach for our highest potential. Thank you, America, for giving me a place to whisper no more and a place to truly breathe freely. Often, it takes someone who lost his or her freedom to remind those who have it just how precious it is. People who come from other countries appreciate America more than those born here. We certainly know. So in closing, I'd like to quote President Reagan, "Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction." Let us all remember, freedom is a precious commodity. It's fragile. We must protect it, treasure it, never take it for granted, but most of all, never, never abuse it. God bless America. God bless the troops that protect us. God bless our great ally, Israel. And let's celebrate and dream for another 250 years of freedom over tyranny. I pledge my continuing fight to protect this exceptional country. And in that spirit, let's raise our glass one more time to another 250 years of freedom. Thank you.
Amen. So magnificently said. Suzanne, thank you so much. You're so deserving of the Hand of Freedom Award. Avi was a very wise man. Thank you. Next is someone who you all know, Frank Gaffney, Rabbi Frank, as we call him. He's the president for the Institute of the American Future, has been warning for decades about pretty much everything. the totalitarian trifecta, red, green, blue alliance. He conducts weekly webinars both on China and about Sharia these days. I hope you find them, bansharia.com. Please look those up. And then Committee on the Present Danger China, again, every week, a webinar on these threats. But today, and he's also on the board of directors of the American Freedom Alliance and speaks at many, many, many of our events. But today he's speaking about American greatness. Please welcome Frank Gaffney.
I think this title is going to stick, I hope. I have to confess, thank you, that I wasn't entirely clear about the program tonight. And so I didn't know exactly what Suzanne was going to talk about. But I was going to talk about it from the perspective of an American. And maybe I could introduce this by just sharing with you a little bit of the miracles that I was blessed by today. One of them was immediately after getting off the plane at LAX this morning, realizing that somebody who I had not heard from in a while, but who I love, had called me in the course of the week. And I'm sure you've all had this experience that suddenly you realize that the call had gone unanswered. So I reached out to her, and she said, "Oh, this happens to you too, probably. That was a pocket call." After I was a little crestfallen that I had not actually been meant to receive a call from her, she said, as it happens, you know, I've been following what you've been doing on this Sharia front, which meant a lot to me because her name is Deborah Burlingame. And some of you recognize it. She was the sister of Captain Chick Burlingame, whose plane was hijacked and flown into the Pentagon 25 years ago this September. And thrust upon her, completely unprepared, I guess one might say, was this incredibly important role of being a leader of the 9/11 families. And in hindsight, you can see God's hand in this because she had been in various stages of her career, a trained actress, a law school graduate, an attorney, a reporter, an on-air talent, as well as behind-the-scenes producer, and a correspondent covering court TV. So in short, she had skill sets that were absolutely invaluable for that sort of extraordinary group of people who were thrust together by this horrific act of jihad. And with her encouragement, I proceeded to reminisce about some of her experiences and her times, among other things, fighting one of the great obscenities of certainly recent memory. The idea that the jihadis would be allowed to build a ground zero mosque. And she and the 9/11 families fought that tooth and tong. And she regaled me with some stories about what the jihadis were doing to, you know, try to advance this program. And the help that they got from the then president of the United States, Barack Hussein Obama. And it brought back so many memories of that time. And really, brought to the forefront of my consciousness something that honestly would have occurred to me eventually, but had really gotten away from me, that this September 11th is the 25th anniversary. So we fell to talking about what do we do about that. But along the trail, she told me a story, which I'm presumptuously going to share with you because I've asked her to do it on one of our webinars tomorrow. I'm hoping she will do it. But she said that during this period when she was not just one of the bereaved family members, but one of the leading and most eloquent and most effective communicators in that group, that she lived at the time in a little bit outside of the city of New York and was a frequent guest on Fox News. And Fox, back in the day, you remember this, Eric, when they used to send limousines to bring you to the studio, would send a limousine up to get her. And in my experience, which is now dated, but usually there was a jihadi who was driving the limousine, which was always a little unsettling. And knowing Deborah, she was absolutely fearless. So she would be using the ride to her business, which would be talking about, among other things, jihadis. And she told me the story that at one point, the driver of the vehicle turns around as he's driving and says, "I'm sorry, ma'am. I shouldn't have done this, but I couldn't help overhearing your conversation." And he said, "I'm from Egypt. And I lived, as Suzanne did, under tyranny." And they began talking about his experiences because it was clear he was not a jihadi. To the contrary, he had come here to get away from them. And in the course of the conversation, she said, it was obvious that he was, like Suzanne, passionate about this country. And she just sort of threw him the softball. What is it that you most love about America? And she said, he turned around and looked at her, and she kind of thought that might cause the car to go into the ditch. Fortunately, it didn't, but he wanted to make eye contact as he responded to this question. And he said, "Freedom. Freedom. Freedom." Which makes him, like our distinguished friend and colleague, what I call a foreign-born American patriot. And you're so right, Suzanne. You have an understanding not only of freedom, and not only of what it's like to enjoy it here, but how perishable it is, how easily lost it can be, and once lost, how difficult, as I think one of the founders pointed out, it is to recover. So I just want to salute those of you who, unlike too many of us, don't get any of that. You're here tonight because you do. You're here because of this wonderful organization led by my dear friend Karen Sigerman so brilliantly, and of course our guest of honor. But you're here because either by virtue of your life experience, your service in the uniform of the United States, like these incredible gentlemen and the rest of you, or just because you're smart. And maybe you've already read his book, but you know that this is a work in progress. And I really do believe it, as I tried to get across in my invocation. We have the privilege of living now at a time when it's all on the line. And I know I'm not supposed to talk about the threats, so I won't, but I do want to just leave you with this closing thought. We're making history. And you generally don't know it when you're in the middle of it. I've got to believe that those founding fathers did. But Eric tells their stories so compellingly that I think even they were not fully aware of how momentous what they were about was until, they were doing it. One of the things, I'll close with this, but one of the things that I was marveling at is there was a year of war before there was a Declaration of Independence, which is an amazing thing. Talk about treason. They were in open rebellion against the government of Britain for a year. And the Brits took notice of it and didn't think well of what they were doing. But even at that point, I think, the full import of it all was probably still not as clear as it should have been to them and as it certainly should be to us. So I just want to thank you for being here and helping both support the work of the American Freedom Alliance, to acknowledge and endorse the work of Eric Metaxas, and to help the rest of us who are not foreign-born American patriots appreciate what they do and resolve that we will, in our time, do what we must, as I said earlier, to ensure that when history looks back at us and reminds us, if we're still around, that we were writing it, that we did our part, that we rose to the occasion, and that we did indeed bequeath what we were privileged to have turned over to us. Take pride in that, folks, and take leadership. God bless you all.
It really does. What Frank just said, the entire story, but also it does take each of us. And if you're in this room, you know that. And if you're in this room, you understand that. And if you're in this room, I guarantee, I know for a fact, you're doing an awful lot to preserve this nation and work for 250 more. So I join Frank in thanking you all for being here and understanding exactly this. Either you fought for it or you're smart, or both. So thank you. We also have Trevor Loudon, who travels the country. I mean, one day he's in this city, one day he's across the country, then he's someplace else. So unbelievably dedicated. And again, a foreign-born American hailing from New Zealand. We're delighted to have him. He's a fellow also of the American Freedom Alliance. He's participated in countless, literally countless of our conferences, speaking events, forums. He's been in this room tons of times. I know you've all seen him. Many books, The Enemies Within, White House Reds, a new book, relatively new, about Kamala, and a new one coming out. He's been a fellow, as I said, and he was also the 2018 honoree of our American Freedom Award that we had put together for Phil Haney. Do you remember Phil Haney? Yeah, a true hero, and Trevor does much of the same work. Also fighting commies, and we honor him with that award. Trevor, please come on up and
welcome, thank you. Can you all hear me down the back okay? Can you understand the southern accent all right? Good, I'm glad. Look, as Karen said, I'm from New Zealand, and we have a couple of Australian friends here tonight. We have my friend Topher, my friend Malcolm's up the back somewhere. Look, if you're not sure where Australia is, it's a little island off New Zealand's west coast, okay? A little tiny little island. But I think they might agree with me when I say something. I was in New Zealand not long ago. My dad passed a year ago. He was 91, you know. And I know there's older people here today, but this is the point. We were talking about World War II. He was a little boy, and they were terrified of a Japanese invasion because most of our men were in North Africa, as most of the Australian men were in North Africa fighting the Nazis. And we all acknowledged that if it hadn't been for the sacrifice of these gentlemen here tonight, your uncles and fathers and grandfathers, and their sacrifice at the Battle of the Bulge in Normandy, their sacrifice at Iwo Jima, the Midway, Guadalcanal, all of that, if it hadn't been for them, we might not be here today. The world would be very, very different. So it's an honor for me to get up here in front of men who actually fought in that war and in Vietnam and other important wars in Korea and say thank you from a New Zealander for what you did. Thank you. Now, I'm a believer in the providential theory of history, meaning I believe God intervenes through history to help us in times of need, to help to steer us towards greater freedom and greater prosperity, to lead mankind into a better state. And I think the American Revolution was one example, one of the greatest examples of that process. You go back to Lepanto, you know, Magna Carta. There were many times where I think God helped and drove us forward. But I want to go back to France, 15th century. King Henry, what was his name? Henry V, I think it was, had invaded France, and he wanted to make France a province of England, as he had done to Scotland and Wales and Ireland. And he was winning. The French were very divided. They couldn't decide who was going to be king. And a little 18-year-old girl came from a farm in northern France, got an audience with many of the French leadership, and actually physically led French armies in battle, successful battles against the English, leading to the restoration of the French monarchy. France was preserved. Well, 300 years later, George Washington, after many, many defeats, had the British, he was around the British at Yorktown. He had French armies with him, but the British under Cornwallis were in Yorktown. And he was surrounding them on one side. And they surrendered. But why did they surrender? Because the French Navy had blockaded Chesapeake Bay so that Cornwallis could get no relief or no retreat. We have an American republic because of France, people. We have France because of Joan of Arc, and we had Joan of Arc because of God. We think in terms of election cycles. God thinks in terms of the sweep of history. He is always watching us, looking for faith, looking for courage. And that brings me to another point. In the book of Revelations, there's a little chapter about the people who go to hell at the end of time. There's the liars, the thieves, the idolaters, the murderers. But the very first two groups to go to hell are the cowards and the faithless. Cowards and the faithless. Because what does being a coward tell God? It tells God you have no faith in him. Because if you have faith, what do you fear on this planet? What do you fear? How do you tell your pastor is a faithful pastor? He will be a courageous pastor. So I'm presuming things here. I've never been in battle. But is it true the veterans here can tell me, if you're a soldier, you're facing battle, and you have faith in God, and faith in your commanding officers, and faith in your fellow comrades, will you be the bravest soldier you can possibly be? If you have no faith, what will you do? You will run. Faith and courage go together. David versus Goliath, a little rock, a bit of string. The giant's coming at him. Everybody's running that way. David charges at the giant and throws the rock. I have no doubt that God guided that rock. But where did David get the courage to throw it if not from his faith? Faith and courage go together. And I think we're going to need a lot of miracles to get us through the coming period. I think we're going to need a lot of divine help and divine inspiration. And where is there any record in history of God helping cowards or the faithless or whingers or moaners or losers? It's courage. Your founding fathers were courageous men motivated by religious liberty. Gideon's army versus the horde. There are countless examples where God intervened to help us go forward. Now, we are all free today because when the time came to fight enemies, your fathers and uncles and some of the men here today were willing to put on uniforms and pick up arms and fight sometimes for years at a time against horrible foreign enemies and horrible conditions. And while they were doing that, your mothers and aunts and great-grandmas were working 14-hour days in factories, munitions factories, hospitals, building Liberty ships, running farms, keeping the kids in school, and staying up till 2 o'clock in the morning writing letters to their boyfriends and husbands overseas. Is it our moral responsibility to do whatever it takes in terms of money, time, and sacrifice to ensure that the freedom we were given by those brave men is preserved in our time? Is it our moral responsibility? And is it our moral responsibility that we do whatever it takes to ensure that our children and grandchildren and those yet unborn are able to live as freely as we are, or even better? Is that our moral duty, or is it not? And when that day of judgment comes, folks, do you want to stand up and say something like, I sweated blood to preserve the greatest republic the world has ever known? Or do you want to say I was the best amateur golfer in the county? What do you want to do, folks? So Karen, our great leader here, has a great phrase that I've stolen. We are going to need miracles to get us through, but there's been miracles in the past. When President Trump had a bullet nick his ear, and he went down on the ground and came up and fight. If that was not a message by God that he wants this country preserved, I've never seen one. But a brave man, Corey Comparatori, died that day on the ground, shielding his family from bullets. Joan of Arc was burnt at the stake for her pains, people. Karen has a great phrase. We're going to need miracles to get us out of this, to go forward, but we have to be miracle worthy. Every single one of us has to be miracle worthy. And it's not just the leaders, it's the talents. We're all given talents for a time such as this. Some of us have great talents, some have average talents, the rest are usually Democrats, unfortunately. But we all acknowledge we're in a time of great spiritual warfare, and God has put us all here at this time for a certain reason. And if all of us use our talents to the maximum, we can prevail. We can prevail. So thank you so much, Karen, for doing this. Thank you for everybody here, and a great thank you for all the veterans here tonight. God bless America. I'm so glad I'm here. God bless liberty. Thank you all.
How? Thank you, Trevor. So great, right? Are you not infinitely grateful? Yeah. Right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Trevor. And yeah, I've been talking about miracle worthiness for a long time, recognizing that our history really, yes, it's great men, of course it is, and great women. But at almost every point in our history, it's been miracles that gave birth to this nation, that allowed one thing to unfold after another, that made us who we are. And a lot of us think about, you know, what is it that I can do, or who should we look to save us? No. That's not it. I'm not going to save us. Trevor's not you all. But as God has chosen every time to intervene on behalf of this great nation, I just hope that in the great spreadsheet in the sky, he sees that this country is still miracle worthy. And that's what we can do, each of us, to be check marks in the plus column, because Lord knows there's a lot of check marks in the negative column as to why this country might be considered not be miracle worthy. But you all here, all the work that you do, countless others, Charlie Kirk, all are in the plus column. And as Trevor mentioned, on July 13th, 2 years ago, if ever there were a sign, that was one, right? And we see them day after day after day. Not everything turns out exactly the way we hope, and we pray a certain, this thing is going to happen. Do we not want arrests? Just saying. Okay. All of that, right? But right. We want accountability, we want justice and everything. But overall, we truly live in the greatest nation in the history of the world. And was it Lincoln who said, I'm paraphrasing, it's not so much that we want God to be on our side, but for us to be on God's side. And that's part of the whole miracle worthiness. So the four of you, I cannot thank you enough. Trevor, Frank, Suzanne, Brad, just such great perspectives on the greatness of this country, where we fit in the scheme of Western civilization historically and today, what we have taken, but what we have given as well. So please, a round of applause to the four. Thank you. And of course, to our veterans, without whom nothing. There's a few other people I want to thank. Certainly the Lux for just hosting such a beautiful event. Do you like our new banner, by the way? Yeah. Thank you. Sign. We're going to use this all year, and then at the end of the year, we're just going to X out the 0 and put a 1 there. Right? Exactly. We're being sensible about things. I want to thank Mark Franklin and Vic for the great camera work, videography, and Brian Seltzer, our photographer. I want to thank the team who did all the decorating. That's Jody, Kate, Diane, and Suzanne. Such a beautiful job. I'm a minimalist when it comes to this, meaning I have no idea how to do it, but they did and they do. And the Paul Revere lanterns and all of this, that was them and everything else. I also want to thank Daniel Schaefer, who was a major sponsor of this event. You may remember the story of Daniel. I met Daniel on the flight on January 4th of 2020 to Washington, D.C. for the January 6th event. We got to talking, and then coincidentally, he was behind me on that flight out and next to me on the flight back. And he said, if there's anything you need with AFA, just reach out. And I didn't really believe him. But when we were bringing Steve Bannon out a few years ago, we needed support in that regard. And I called Daniel. I said, we need some help. And he was right there with it. Daniel performs miracles. He has been a miracle worker for AFA. Thank you. And to all of you who support us, I just can't thank you enough. So now to the pièce de résistance. Oh my gosh, I've been pinching myself that we're hosting Eric Metaxas. I can't quite believe it. I've been following him for years and years and years. Came to my attention with the book Bonhoeffer, who weirdly, Bonhoeffer lived down the street. Bonhoeffer lived down the street from my dad, who was born in Berlin in 1928. It's only about a block long of a street, and they lived on the same street. So just personal connection. The book is brilliant if you haven't read it. All subsequent books of utter genius. This book, Revolution, the birth of the greatest nation in the history of the world. I read a lot of history, I imagine all of you do too, and a lot of history books can bring one to tears from the horrors that man inflicts upon man. War stories are just horrific. This one continuously brings me to tears for an entirely different reason. Profound gratitude. Everything that they went through, the history, it comes alive. And these are our people. These are us. We know how it ends, right? One of you mentioned that. We know how, they didn't know. And still, they did what they did. When they wrote the Declaration of Independence, as Frank said, it was already a year in. They already had bounties on their heads. They were already deemed traitors. They were already deemed traitors. And still, and when they sent the little letter to King George III, they knew, they were pretty certain he wasn't going to write back and say, you make some excellent points. I think, you're right. You're a long distance away. It's been 150 years. You've made your own world over there. Power to you. All the best in your future endeavors. It's been great. They pretty much knew that wasn't how it was going to go down. I don't think they expected 8 years of war, but that was just the beginning. And every year since, as Reagan has pointed out, as everyone has pointed out, we need to continuously fight for this. Evil is relentless. Good has to be relentless too. And that's on us. So this book brings that forward. And it also, just tiny story, I used to work in underwater acoustics a million years ago. I don't know if you knew that. I was a scientist, Cold War stuff. And I worked at this company, and I was doing some sciencey things and whiteboards, and I got stuck somewhere. And I went down to somebody else's office, and I said, I'm stuck right here. And he said, show me where. I said, this is the place. And then one of the more brilliant people in the organization, there were brilliant people there, because this was, in fact, where they invented the internet, just saying. So there were smart people there. One of the more brilliant people walked by, and he said, what's going on? I said, I'm stuck right here. And he went back to first principles of physics, of acoustics. And I'm so irritated because I'm not stuck there. I get that. I'm stuck right here. He started way back, first principles, and the next thing, and the next thing. Then he got to where I was. And all of a sudden, it was very clear what to do next. And this book reminds me of that. As, by the way, John Adams, when he was trying to figure out what to do, he harked to our founding principles. So if we wonder what to do next, this book reminds us what we can go back to, because it's all there. And it's not just 1776, it's not just 1620. These principles are literally biblical. And when we deracinate which is what the left tries to do to everything all the time, meaning disconnecting us from our roots, again, our load-bearing walls, which is what they do, then we get confused and don't know what to do, which is why they do this. The more we reattach to our founding principles, the easier it all is. Just as when Jim Barger walked by and started with this irritating stuff, I got that. It makes the next steps so clear because those principles are the principles. They're not some principles. They're the principles that make all this work. So I want to thank Eric Metaxas for this brilliant book. It is truly a work of art. It is a magnificent story. It's our story. It's beautifully told. It will make you weep because it's your story. We are so blessed. It's on us to keep it. A republic, if you can keep it, it's on us. But this book will give you the strength, the knowledge, the confidence to do what you need to do, to keep fighting the fight in however way is your way. As Trevor said, we all have our own skills, but we all can do something. So this book, it's so extraordinary. And I heard Eric Metaxas on Steve Bannon's War Room. And what he was talking about is the how interconnected faith and freedom are and the extent to which Judeo-Christianity is really the sine qua non of what we are. They are the load-bearing walls. So please join me in welcoming the utterly brilliant Eric Metaxas.
God bless you. Thank you. Karen, you embarrassed the hell out of me. None of that is true. That was so... listen, I am so honored to be here. I can't tell you. I'm so honored to have such kind words spoken about me and then to know the truth. I am. I'm very, very honored to be here. And I'm honored to be in a room with so many American heroes. It's very humbling for me to get up here and to add anything to what's already been said. Everyone who spoke before me stole things that I was just going to say. Every one of them. So I only got about an hour's worth of material left that I'm going to deliver. I'll do my best. No, there's so much I want to say. I do feel a sense of joy here tonight. I've met so many of you. I feel like I've made a number of real friends tonight. You realize there's a joy here. This is a rare thing here, what you have here. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing to honor this country and to be in the room with people that are, who fought in World War II. That was not on my dance card for tonight. So thank you. It's unbelievable. And the history, folks, the living history, when you think about it. Bazooka Joe here is 107 years old. I've never met anyone that's that old. I had the privilege a few years ago of interviewing someone on my radio program who was 104 years old. He's just a punk compared to Bazooka Joe. But I remember interviewing this man who was 104, and he was telling me about his great-grandfathers, whom he knew, one of whom fought on the Confederate side, and one of whom fought on the Union side. And he knew them, and he's talking to me on my program about them. This is living history, folks. We all have our stories, and by the way, the two great-grandparents didn't really get along very well. But I do love history, and it's just a joy to talk to people who have been in these places and to hear so much of what we heard tonight. My dad passed away a couple of years ago. He was 96 and a half, and he came to this country from Greece, where the communists tried to take over. My mom, whom I speak with every day and visit every week, she's 92. She grew up in Germany, which was taken over by the part of Germany where she grew up was taken over by the Soviets. So she escaped East German communism when she was 17 years old. So my parents, who came to this country, taught me to love this country and to hate communism. And I was looking through some papers recently, and I found their naturalization certificates from 1960. And I tell you, this is the thing, is for anybody who has come from another place, you appreciate what we have here. And of course, we have to get the people who are here to appreciate what we have here. And I think part of that is happening. I even remember when I was 7 years old, 1971, we went to visit East Germany. And I remember as a 7-year-old looking at the train as we go across the border and seeing the barbed wire and the dogs and the soldiers. And, you know, my mother explaining to me, yeah, they're keeping them in. They're keeping them in because nobody wants that. Nobody wants that. And so my parents taught me to love this country. So it's very moving to be in a room with people who love this country. I want to say God bless you all, because we need people who really love this nation and understand what it's all about. I wrote this book, Revolution. I wasn't planning to. It's kind of funny. A few people have mentioned God here. I'm an atheist, but I got to tell you that that's a lie. I'm not an atheist. I never was an atheist, but something happened to me around my 25th birthday. God came into my life in a very powerful, palpable way and changed my life. And I've tried to do everything I do in my career following God's lead. But I never ever would try to. I never thought that I would write a book on the American Revolution. And a little bit over 2 years ago, a friend of mine had read my book, 7 Men, and he read the chapter in George Washington, and he said, Eric, this really moved me almost to tears, and you should write about the whole revolution. And I said, I never thought about writing about the American Revolution. Never in my life, not one time have I ever thought of writing a book on the American Revolution. And people always have ideas for books from me, and I hate that. I go, hey, have you thought about writing about John Calvin? No, I haven't, and now that I have, I won't. Thank you. You know, they act like writing a book, you can knock it out in a weekend. Well, come on, do it, really. But when he mentioned the revolution, I thought, it was one of those ideas, I thought, that's interesting. Let me think about that. And then I realized that our 250th was coming up. And by the way, the proper term for the 250th, it's America's supercentennial. You need to know that. God gave me that term. I shared it with the president. He said he loved it. He shared it on Fox News, and he never mentioned it again. And that's the only reason that I voted for Kamala Harris. I'm kidding. But the supercentennial, it's a moment of celebration. And the reason I bring this up is that I believe we are right now in the third existential crisis of American history. The first is the revolution. We never should have won that war. Somebody hand me a water there. It's like and a little vodka also. We never should have won that war. That's a fact. The second is the Civil War. And the third is right now. And I say this because I think this is God's hand, that when we're in an existential crisis, it means that everything is on the line, okay? World War II was important. The Korean War was important, right? But an existential crisis, if you lose everything. And that was the revolution. That was the Civil War. We are in that now, and you know that. We're in that now. We have elements of Islamofascism, communism. They want to take down the greatest nation in the history of the world, and they're working hard to do that. But I believe God has ordained that we will keep the republic. I believe that. But I don't just say that. If you had said to George Washington in 1776, hey, you're going to win, he would say, okay, but we still have to fight. We still have to suffer. Men still have to die. When you're in a war, whether it's a war or you still have to suffer and die. Just because, and it's been said tonight, just because you're going to win doesn't mean you don't have to fight and suffer. And some people will die and you'll take casualties. My friend Charlie Kirk was murdered There are people today suffering. I had friends who were there on January 6th who were in solitary confinement for a year. When you're in a war, people suffer. So the question is, what do? You pray. You know that if God is with you, you will win. If God is with you, you can never lose. Even if you lose, you win if God is with you. And you need to determine, somebody else said, Trevor said about being miracle worthy. And that's kind of the theme of my book. Excuse me. The theme of the book, in a sense, the reason the reason the book is titled Revolution is I wanted it to be a definitive story of the American Revolution. I said, I want to write a definitive book. I thought somebody needs to write a book that in one volume tells the whole story of how we came into being 250 years ago. Because there's plenty of books on the revolution, but there's not one book that tells the whole story. And then, of course, we're getting some woke versions. I don't know if anybody had the misfortune to see Ken Burns' PBS documentary of 12 Hours. Anybody see that? Miss it if you can. It's worth missing. It's worth missing. I would say the same about the Odyssey, but we're not talking about that tonight. It's definitely worth missing. But the point is that the reason I wanted to write this book, I said somebody needs to write a book that tells the whole story in one volume. And it's not really that the book is a celebration. It is a celebration, but it's not trying to be a celebration. If you just tell the story of the birth of America, it is inescapably inspiring and celebratory, because the story of the birth of America is just one of the most beautiful stories in the history of the world. It's one of the most extraordinary stories in the history of the world. So my goal was simply to tell the story. And when I told people that I'm writing a book on the revolution, everybody said, "What's your angle? What's your angle on the revolution? What's your angle? What are you gonna write about?" Like I'm some academic, I got to find some angle. And I said, I don't have an angle. I just want to tell the story because I think we as Americans need to know our story. Now, the people in this room, most of you are the exception. You already know this stuff. But most people, certainly my age or younger, and I've never felt so young in my life. Thank you, Bazooka Joe. But most people, we either haven't heard it or we've heard people run down the country and denigrate the country and not celebrate the country. So there's tremendous ignorance in American culture right now with regard to our history. So I thought I just want to write a book that just tells the story because we owe it to the men who died in that war and suffered in that war and fought in that war. We ought to know their story. We ought to know the struggle. We ought to know all their stories. I said, I want to put it in a book. That's my goal. But in the course of writing it, I found an angle. And this is what's so strange. I didn't expect that, but because it's not like I knew all this stuff and I thought, I'm going to put it in a book. I just knew I want to write a book. I know a little bit, but then you start doing the research and you start seeing things. And it happens to me every time I write a book, and this is no exception. I saw a lot of things I had never seen before, ever. And one of those things was the frankly religious nature of the whole thing. I had never seen how dramatically Christian it was. I had never seen this before. But as you're doing the research, you realize that the 13 colonies at that time were just astonishingly Christian. Everybody knew the Bible. They're quoting the Bible. It's just everywhere you look. And I thought, this is interesting. I haven't really heard this. And you hear a lot of people, a lot of historians, and Ken Burns and the other, they keep pushing out the lie that all the founders were deists. Folks, that is an absolute nonsense. I can't tell you, nonsense is much too nice a word for what that is. It is a foul, vile lie. The men of the revolution were profound Christians. And when I say profound Christians, I don't mean they said, oh, I'm not an atheist, I'm not a Jew, I'm not a Muslim, I'm a Christian. We're not talking about tribal identity. Okay, we're talking about people who took their faith extremely seriously. And when I did the research, it was everywhere I looked, and I thought, how come nobody talks about this? How come people try to pawn off George Washington as some kind of a deist? It's absolute nonsense. But so I thought I want the book to be definitive. So I was going to call it The American Revolution. Then I thought, no. This is the only revolution in the history of the world that succeeded in doing what it set out to do. if you know the history, it's also a vile lie, even to compare the French Revolution to the American Revolution. It's ridiculous, because the French Revolution, and this is the heart of the story, the French Revolution got rid of the king and queen, killed the king and queen. And after they killed the king and queen, they killed all the priests and nuns because they didn't want God to be part of it. Our revolution, dramatically different. We got rid of an earthly king and did what the Israelites did in the Sinai wilderness, getting out from under Pharaoh and out of Egypt, out of bondage, and being alone in the Sinai desert and looking up to God as our king. That is what all of the founders, all the men of the revolution understood, that narrative. And every American needs to understand that narrative, because that's history. That's not Christian history. That's American history. That is true. And even if you don't agree with it, you don't have to agree with it. But the point is, you need to know that's how they saw it. They saw it that we're getting out from under an earthly king, but now we look to God as our king. And we can never govern ourselves unless we're governed by God. That is how they all saw it. And the more research I did, the more I was shocked that it was everywhere I looked, but nobody seemed to know this. And if you want to know how dramatically true it is, I mean, as I said, the French Revolution, they get rid of the king and the queen, then they kill the priests and nuns. And how did that go? They talked about, we're going to get liberty, egalite, fraternité. How did that work out? They got rid of the king and the queen, and they replaced them with what? First, a bloodbath, a horrible bloodbath of terror. And then they get a dictator emperor named Napoleon. So how did that trade work out? Yeah, you want to get rid of a king. Now you got an emperor dictator. We got rid of a king, and we genuinely became free. We governed ourselves because we were under God. So that's the Sinai covenant. And they were self-conscious of going back to Sinai. They were self-conscious. The men of the revolution understood what they were doing. Samuel Adams, another one of the great heroes, and one of the joys of writing this book is to introduce these names and these stories to some people who don't know anything about them. But Samuel Adams was the father of the revolution. And he gave a speech to Congress the day before they signed the Declaration of Independence. Now, who knows the day that they signed the Declaration of Independence? I'll wait. I just love when people blurt out wrong answers. It's delightful up here, just listening. August 2nd. If you said August 2nd, yeah. The reason I say this is actually, I hope you'll read the book, but even more important, it wouldn't kill you to buy 2 or 3 copies. But it's all in the book, and I don't want to belabor this, but it is an amazing thing that they declare independence on July 2nd, right? That's the big day, July 2nd, okay? Then on the 3rd and the 4th, they debate the Declaration. They debate the text of the Declaration, and so on the 4th, they approve it. So now they have to get printed up a special engrossed version, which you're all going to sign eventually, which is going to be August 2nd. And at the top of it, of course, they write July 4th, because that was the date it was approved, whatever. So we all have this idea in our minds that they signed it on July 4th. But anyway, there's more to the story. But the point I want to make is that on August 1st, the day before they sign this, the day before they do this thing that makes them tremble, knowing the tremendous gravity of what they are doing. The day before, Samuel Adams, the great Samuel Adams, gives a speech outside Independence Hall to Congress. So now you have a member of Congress giving a speech to Congress. And in that speech, he uses the phrase, he says, we have restored the sovereign, the king. We've restored the true king, capital S, who is God. And he says this, he's not giving this group talking to a Bible study group. He's talking to Congress, a member of Congress. He's explaining to them what we've done. We've restored the sovereign. We got rid of an earthly king who was behaving in a tyrannous way, who did not respect our rights. And we've restored the true king, who is God. That narrative of the Sinai covenant of the Israelites in the wilderness looking directly to God. That was the narrative that they all got. And to anybody who says, oh, what about the deists in the room? The least religious members of Congress, the least, Franklin and Thomas Jefferson, both of them, when they were asked to design a seal for the new nation, Franklin comes up with an image of Moses overseeing the parting of the Red Sea. Pretty Jewish, don't you think? Pretty biblical. What does Jefferson come up with? We need just an image. We can't give a paragraph, just a picture. What's the picture of the new nation? Jefferson comes up with the image of the Israelites in the Sinai desert looking to the pillar of fire and the cloud. Folks, it doesn't get more biblical than that. And these are the two least religious members of Sinai Declaration. They all got the narrative. They all got the memo. This is what we're doing. And it's never been done in the history of the world. Never. This country cannot be compared to other countries. And this does not mean, it doesn't mean that we are better. We are no better. We don't deserve to live in this country. Everybody wants to live in this country. We've been given an outrageous gift from God to live in a country where we can govern ourselves. It's an extraordinary thing. And so all of the men of that time understood that we needed to be, as Trevor said, miracle worthy. And this is covenant theology. This is Old Testament theology, that we want to be a nation whose God is the Lord. And we want to honor him in our behavior so that he smiles on our efforts. Because we didn't have the biggest navy and army in the world. They did. But we knew that if we trust God and if we do his will, and we behave in a way that's worthy of him, he will smile on our efforts. That's covenant theology. And we need to understand that was what they were doing. And again, secular people maybe don't like to hear that. Well, the fact is you don't need to like it, but you need to know that's what they thought they were doing. And that's not debatable. It's simply not debatable, but it's been airbrushed out of our history by secularists who are uncomfortable with it and want to pretend that you could get liberty and all the ideas of freedom, liberty, equality, that you can get those ideas from the French Enlightenment. You cannot. You don't get these ideas from French philosophy. You don't get these ideas, if I can say, from the Quran. You don't get these ideas from the Quran. Did you know that? You don't. You don't. Where do you get these ideas from? Where do you get the idea that we are all equal? Think about in history, the insanity of saying that we're equal. That's the most insane idea in the history of the world. It's obvious nobody's ever been equal. Where would we get that idea? From the Bible. God says we're equal. Nobody else says we're equal. Nobody else observes that we're equal. The Bible says it. And all of the men of the revolution understood we go according to this book. And this book says we're equal. This book said all these ideas come out of the scripture. So the idea that this country could come into being, or these ideas could come into being from anything other than the Bible of the Jews, it can't happen. It won't happen. We need to understand that that's our history. It's simply inescapable. And then we need to understand that that's how they all saw it, as I just explained. So they were very serious about this, and they were very serious about behaving in a way that would make them, to use Trevor's phrase again and again, to be miracle worthy. They said, we are covenanting with God, and we need to behave in such a way that he will smile on our efforts or we'll lose. And so they all took that seriously. Washington, in July of 1775, when he takes command of the Continental Army, he commands in an order his men, his officers, that all of their troops have to stop swearing and gambling, and they have to attend divine services on Sunday. Now, why would he do that? Well, you see over and over and over, it's everywhere. This is why I was just half crazy writing this book. I said, this is everywhere I look. They were obsessed with the idea that we have to honor God. God is real. God's not a theory. God is real. And if we honor him in how we fight and how we behave, he will smile on our efforts. They said this over and over and over and over. That was their game plan. So, of course, you fight, you do everything you can, but you know that apart from God, we will lose. The British had just the opposite view, and this is what shocked me. The British elites of the time, and again, came from my research. I wasn't really clear until I did the research. They were extraordinarily godless. The British elites of the time were godless, were corrupt, were cynical. Now, this is not every one of them, but largely speaking, the culture of the British elites was tremendously immoral. And you see evidence of that everywhere. When you look at George Washington is so upstanding and he's talking about virtue and character, and everybody knew that about him. His counterpart on the British side was General Howe. General Howe was known to have a mistress during all the years that he was in America. It wasn't like, oh, he has a mistress, a few people whispered about it. No, everyone knew that he had a mistress. Everyone knew, because that was how you behaved in the world of the British elites. And so the British elites, not only were they not serious about their faith in the way that the colonials were serious about their faith, but the British elites mocked the faith of the Americans. They mocked the faith of the Americans. Now, this is similar today. It's as if the Hollywood elites or the Manhattan elites where I live were governing a conservative town in Oklahoma. You think they're from the same country, they speak the same language, but their values and their culture could not be more different. At what some one of them called the Bible-faced Yankees. And it's important we understand this because it plays out in how they fought the war. When you read the book, you'll see that the British were barbaric. They were sadistic in the way they treated oftentimes the Americans would surrender, and the British or their Hessian counterparts would bayonet the Americans to death who were surrendering. And you see this over and over and over and over. It's like the Japanese or the Nazis in World War II, sadistic, because it comes out of a worldview. If you don't believe in God, if you believe might makes right, you know that we can crush the enemy and we will crush the enemy. That's how we're going to win. The Americans genuinely looked to God, and that astonished me everywhere I looked. So the story of the American Revolution, part of the reason I wrote the book also is I thought that in this existential crisis we're in right now, which I believe God has said we're going to win. When that bullet hit Trump's ear, as Karen said, that was a sign to all of us. God is saying, just as he dodged that bullet, you have dodged that bullet. I have determined that you will live. You should be dead, but I have determined that you will live. That's God's determination. But now our job, what do you do when you dodge a bullet and you see the blood? What's the first thing you do? You say, fight, 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 right? You say fight. So we're here to fight, and God will be with us, but we have to be worthy of God. And I think that if we're worthy of God, God really is with us. We can depend on it. And I think right now we can depend on it. There's a moment, Samuel Adams, whom I just mentioned, a year after he gives that speech, he gives another speech. Now things are looking really bad. The British have taken Philadelphia. And so 1777, Congress gets out of there and they're hiding in York or Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And they're really, it's looking bad. And Samuel Adams gives another speech. And in his speech, he declares, good tidings will survive. Now, how could he say that? He basically lays it out. It's in my book. You can read most of it. But he basically says, we have honored God. And what we're doing is a sacred cause. We're trying to create a country, a form of government that honors God, and that is a biblical idea of liberty, people governing themselves, looking directly to God. And he says, because of that, God is with us and will be with us. And so he declares good tidings will soon arrive, because he knows God is real. He knows this is not some fantasy. This is not just, a nice idea to have God on your side. They lived this. They knew this was the only way forward. God was the God of liberty. And so he says, good tidings will soon arrive. Where's the evidence? Well, a few weeks later, they get the news from Saratoga. that we have crushed Burgoyne's army, the entire war is changed immediately. The French come in, and I think, that turned out good for us. So it's an amazing thing to me, as I did the research, to see that the men of the revolution really did look to God. They really were explicit and conscious of what they were doing, that this was God's idea of how to govern ourselves, as had never been done in the history of the world before. This was God's idea, and that they believed in this idea of providential history, that this is a moment in history where they get to do this. But they said, but we have to be the good guys. We have to behave in a certain way that we're worthy of God's favor. And I think that's the story of America, folks, that we're the good guys. We're the good guys. My mother, who is 92, has told me that as a little girl in Germany, when Germany lost the war and the soldiers started arriving, they knew when the American soldiers came, those are the good guys. When the Russian soldiers arrived, it's like, no, those are the ones that rape. We have always been the good guys. That's who we're supposed to be. And the moment we cease to be the good guys, the moment we cease to honor God in how we behave, America will go away. But I don't believe that that's going to happen. I believe God has ordained that we will keep the republic. And I often think of Henry Wadsworth Longfellow wrote his poem, Paul Revere's Ride, one of the greatest poems in the history of the world. He wrote that poem in 1860 because America was going through its second existential crisis of its history. And he wanted to take us back to the first principles, to remind us. And my book certainly can't compare with Longfellow, but it's the same concept. If we go back and we remind ourselves of who we are and what these men did and what the principles were behind it, only that way can we find the strength to fight now and to be encouraged, to know that good tidings will soon arrive. Now, everywhere we look, we all have our stories of how we're in this existential crisis right now. We see it. Many of us have been canceled. Karen has her whole story. My latest story is that this book has been #2 on the New York Times list twice. Today, the new list came out, it's #5. It's been at the top of the list for 6 weeks, 7 weeks, 6 weeks. Barnes & Noble is not carrying it. If you go to bn.com and type in the word revolution, usually the bestsellers pop right up. They're pushing them at you, right? If you type in the word revolution, barnesandnoble.com, the book doesn't even show up anywhere. Now, I'm just telling you, that's one little example, but we understand we're in a battle. We're in a war with people that hate this country, hate the God of the Bible, hate the people that love the God of the Bible, hate the people that love America, hate the people that love this president for standing up for this country. And we are daily dealing with this. But I want to encourage you that during the revolution, let's not pretend that all the Americans were on the side of George Washington. There were plenty of them that were happy to sit on the fence, see which way is the wind going to blow. We're not going to stick our necks out. We don't care about liberty, whatever. I just want to, I just want to keep my job or whatever it was. There were plenty Americans that sided with the British. There's always going to be people on the other side. The question is, are there going to be enough people on our side? Are we willing to fight? Are we willing to do what is necessary? And so every one of us in this room, we have a job to do. Karen has said this. Every one of us has a job to do. And the only question is, will you do the job that God called you to do? Right now, I'm doing all the media I can around this book because, frankly, I want this book to be in the mainstream, not just so that those of us who love America will read it, but those people who don't know the story of America will read the story of America and fall in love with America and decide, you know what, I want to side with those people who are fighting for this country. So we're in that battle right now. Tonight, honestly, it's just a deep honor and joy to be in a room full of patriots like this. I cannot tell you, we were moved to tears over here listening to some of this. I want to thank you for inviting me. I'll be happy to hang out and talk and sign books, but I really believe God has determined that he will save this nation for his purposes going forward. God bless you.
Are we not the luckiest people in the history of the world, not just to be Americans, but here tonight? Thank you so much. I so appreciate all of you. Eric Metaxas, thank you. Trevor, Frank, Suzanne, Brad Thayer. Thank all of you, Bob, all our veterans. We all know what we have to do for 250 more. Thank you for being here. God bless America.